on to Steve Ensley, who's the CEO of a website called American Family Online, which we will come to shortly, because wow, what a poisonous tree that fruit dropped from. Says there is no argument that video gaming is an extremely effective training tool. These young minds will be indoctrinated to homosexual relationships as normal lifestyles, with homosexual characters being portrayed as heroes in warfare and in romantic situations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The trouble I have when I read these things is that a lot of what they say is outrageous, but it's just it isn't. I don't find a lot of the things that they're worrying about.
No,
so I sort of like, okay, so that's not going to happen, or
it's like the article you shared on WhatsApp on the group chat the other day. It's because they have this. There's no understanding of what gaming is actually like and the process of gaming and what you take away from gaming. If you game with a character who happens to be gay, it doesn't suddenly turn you gay just because you're playing it with you. Yeah, you know. At least I think that's what he was getting at, but I don't know. I could be wrong. But like, it doesn't even matter anyway, does it? You know, I mean, we've already touched on how ridiculous what he said is, but yeah, I don't know.
Well, I think what I was trying to flesh out a moment ago is that I think men like that feel like if they went to prison, the two things, if we learn anything from Shawshank, what the Shawshank Redemption, what the trope is that men are going to be sexually assaulted and face violence when they go into prison, and I feel like that's how they see gay people, just as predators who after them, because that's what this is saying. It's saying that they're gay people are predators who are trying to indoctrinate young people to try them. Literally, in another article we'll come on to later, it says literally BioWare has turned to the dark side by promoting gay relationships in their game. Right,
it speaks volumes though about the level of violence and the level of predatory behaviour that these fear from other men. You know, the whole thing is just speaks volumes, I think, about social attitudes to men as violent creatures, even men viewing men in that way. So it's just that's the way it is.
Yeah, the idea that it's violence. Violent men are fine as long as they're not being violent towards me.
Yeah.
Mm.
Okay, we'll move on to the last American politician we've got here. His name's Leland Yee, and he was a senator in America for California, I think, state senator. And he says gamers have just bear in mind the military-industrial complex in America. I think it's $800 billion that they get for the military now, which 99% of that goes to private military contractors. So bear that in mind. Gamers have just got to quiet down. Gamers have no credibility in this argument. This is all about their lust for violence and the industry's lust for money. This is a billion-dollar industry. This is about their self-interest. It feels like that just feels a little bit hypocritical.
What was the argument? What was he actually referencing to? Or do you not know?
I don't know. I'm afraid that was blown out of the water when I Googled him on a whim, because he Yee was arrested by the Federal Bureau of Investigation on March 26, 2014, on charges relating to public corruption and gun trafficking. Specific, so that sort of caught my attention. and is specifically buying automatic firearms and shoulder-launched missiles from the Moro. I know, right? Wait until you hear this bit. The Moro Islamic Liberation Front.
Okay.
Do you know what that would be an acronym of? Moro Islamic Liberation Front.
No. Yeah. Wow.
Okay.
The FBI, they have a very creative like sort of task force that come up with these ridiculous convoluted ways to catch people, and that's exactly the kind of thing that they would come up with. And then he attempted to sell them to an FBI agent, an undercover FBI agent.
Wow.
Do you care to guess how long he got in prison for this? For international gun trafficking and public corruption.
6 months.
Yeah. Probably not long.
5 years.
Yeah.
So yes, we need to listen to him when it comes to video games. That brings this segment to a close. We have to come back to Star Wars again, because the American Family Association really don't like BioWare, or they didn't 14 years ago when this was first coming out. This one has a fabulous intro. In a new Star Wars video game, it seems that the dark side is now winning in the battle for the hearts and minds of our children. Everything is a battleground. And that's actually quite useful to bring me on to a thing to bear in mind while we're talking through these things, because as you'll see some similarities with the last session of what we did. Look, you find a lot of people think that they're on the right side of history, that they're fighting the good fight. But a good barometer of where you are is, imagine you're in a battlefield and you're in a foxhole with you and your people. Take a peek out and look to the foxhole, to your right, to your left, to the front, to the back, and look at who's in them and go, I don't want to be. I shouldn't be anywhere near these people. And this is partially... We're going to talk very briefly about Kathleen Stock, because I thought about reading something that she does, but there's nothing funny. There's nothing funny in what she writes. Unlike this, the old Star Wars: The Old Republic had firmly stated in 2009 that they would not bow to pressure from homosexual extremists who are demanding gay and lesbian content be added to the video game. BioWare has now, bear in mind, this is what their response is to BioWare's actions. BioWare claimed it was their policy to remain neutral. Now BioWare has violated its own policy, as well as the values of millions of parents who don't want their kids indoctrinated with pro-homosexual propaganda. Instead, BioWare has caved to a handful of vitriolic LGBT protesters and is adding a same-sex component to the video game. So do you think, what kind of content do you think they added? Do you think they added steamy orgies of men and bisexuals and lesbians?
Probably not.
I doubt
No. No.
That's what would you imagine would stir such an extreme response?
Probably something quite tame, I expect, judging by the way they phrased it.
Yes, you are completely right.
Mm-hmm.
Surprise. Over the next, it's a long-term thing. It's like an online thing that they've been adding things to for the last decade. And over that decade, they've added about half a dozen gay or lesbian or bisexual characters in content that you have to buy. So that's hardly bringing down Western civilization.
No, it's interesting that they refer to it as like indoctrination and propaganda. Like, we must be rather paranoid about it to be using those types of phrases.
Again, it's that thing of obsessing over something because you can't get it off your mind. Some people like they're just clearly just repressed and need to have a look at themselves, and some people are just assholes. And it's that line between there are just repressed people, and then there are grifters who are using that for their own means. Another article from Florida Family Organization. Again, these are all coming from, we want the best for our families. That's all. The title was Star Wars video game may soon allow players, including children, to choose a homosexual or transvestite in their games. And that this will mean that children and teens who never thought any way but heterosexual are now given a choice to select a same-gender romance character. And like you say, Alex, there's that indoctrination.
Yeah.
I think we can't escape from that.
But they're making an assumption that what they think is going to be the only thing that's going to happen. Because that's what they think, so therefore it must be true. It must be happening. Because that's the way they feel. Which is an assumption. Which is wrong. So yeah, it's a tough one to kind of pick apart. You could spend many an hour, I'm sure. But yeah.
As with all of these things, you just sort of, you look at it, the more you look at it, sort of the less it makes sense.
Yeah. But how are they to know how children think if they think 100% heterosexual all the time? They can't know that because no one ever knows anybody.
That's a good point. And there's always the argument that if God made it, then it must have something.
Yeah.
It must mean something. There's another AmericanDecency.org. There are a lot, it turns out, again, fruit of the poisonous tree. There's a massive poisonous tree from which all of this Christian stuff comes from. And they say that given the powerful and insidiously destructive influence of the majority of entertainment media, we are called to turn from our wicked ways of entertainment selections that dishonor the Lord and degrade us, his temple. Exposing the unfruitful works of darkness, we seek then to stand in opposition to the flow of pornography and indecency in the marketplace and the media. And again, it always comes back to how do they know? How do you know porn's such a big deal? You need to know these things, and it's just I've watched so much porn, and it's terrible. I just have to do more of it. I have to research more of it. And even more porn and games. Fake love, fake war. Why so many men are addicted to internet porn and video games. Oh, and also the last article said that LGBT activists are trying to capture the minds of our children through the intense emotions children encounter when playing games. Have you ever changed something about yourself completely in the throes of gaming passion?
No, I can't say that I recollect that. No, I do remember being told off for getting too angry as a child, and being essentially banned from gaming for like a day or two just because I was too angry. Could not control my emotions. But no, never had any intense revelations about my own personality or beliefs or values.
Jeb, has a game ever manipulated you like that?
No, I don't think so. And it's really interesting because when I was studying media studies in my degree, we looked at the experiments that have been done to TV violence and film violence and its correlation or not to real world violence. And I remember there was a study, famous study done where they got children into a room. They got them to watch various film, TV shows. They got them into where there was a big. It was called like a Bobo doll, I think. It's a big sort of person-shaped thing on a sort of rocker. So and then they saw that children who just watched violent movies or violent shows were more likely to come in and beat the doll up than ones who hadn't. and so this created this like long-term sort of like discussion about the impact of TV on people's violence. But my understanding is that what they actually then went on to discover is that there is an initial reaction, but it doesn't last for very long. So it doesn't. You're not going to change your personality because of it, but you might come away from watching a violent film feeling a little bit more violent. But that happens with all things. You come away from a rom-com feeling more romantic. You come away from a comedy feeling more amused. So it's just a natural thing. So of course we're affected by the games that we play, and sometimes we're affected very profoundly. But it's just one of these moral panics, isn't it? That's based on very little. And despite many studies, they've not been able to conclusively, children that watch violent movies are more likely to commit violent crime than children who don't. The same applies to computer games. There's no evidence to link computer games with, violent computer games with violent behaviour. However, I think we do need to see that we, when we're talking about sexism, we have said on this podcast that having sexist tropes being constantly reinforced in gaming does have a negative impact on people's sort of real world opinion of gender equality. And I think we can't have it both ways. We have to be sensitive to that works in ways we might not like as well as ways that we might like. Sorry, Alex.
No, it's all right. I was just having a thought that perhaps where these people are worried about games influencing someone to change their sexuality, etc., perhaps they're looking for something tangible to pin the reason on, because they don't understand it just being a natural inclination that someone might suddenly have or come to have as they grow. Because they can't wrap their heads around someone naturally feeling that way and naturally being that way, they're looking for tangible things to pin it on and be like, oh well, this is what's causing it. That's what the explanation is. So maybe that's kind of why they're homing in on like tangible things like games and media, possibly. I don't know. It was just a fleeting thought that I had while we were discussing it.
It reminds me of you saying about the Mormon song about pushing everything inside the box.
Yeah.
Problem is the problem emerges when the box explodes.
Exactly.
Inevitably explodes.
Yes.